This week on the Computer Chronicles, who owns what on the internet? A copyright lawyer explains the basics on ownership of HTML code and domain names. We'll look at the huge business of academic plagiarism, lecture notes, and term papers online. There are millions of photos and artwork images online. Can you use them? Can you protect them? We'll show you a solution from Adobe. And the real hotbed of online copyright issues, MP3 music files. Everything you ever wanted to know about what's legal and what's not. Plus my pick of the week, the biggest, baddest notebook computer I've ever seen. It's all coming up next on the Computer Chronicles. The Computer Chronicles is brought to you by RonDiamond.com, the oldies site on the internet. Music and memories from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, not just another jukebox. Additional support comes from the law offices of Ivan Hoffman, lawyering with integrity for internet law, copyright, trademark, and other intellectual property law. And by TechWeb for up-to-the-minute technology news. Hi, and welcome to the Computer Chronicles. I'm Stuart Chaffee. Well, in the world of the internet, in the world in which everything is now in digital form, the whole field of copyright, the ownership of intellectual property, has been thrown into a state of confusion. How do you apply old analog rules to this new digital world, a world in which anyone can instantly copy or transmit or distribute words, pictures, or sounds? Well, we're going to start out with the basics. Who owns web content? Who owns HTML code? And who decides whether you get to use that URL you want? Here to help us get started is David Kramer, an intellectual property lawyer who specializes in internet issues. David, let me start with the basic question. You see some content on a website, you say, that's cool, I like that on my website. I'm just going to grab it and put it on my site. Can you do that?
Almost certainly not.
Okay.
What we've got up here is our
your
firm's website, and actually why don't we call up this site, which is
so
my
this is all
profile
about you.
there.
So I say, hey, I'm going to create a catalog of lawyers, and I'm going to put this guy in my website.
And what you'll find on this page is a copyrighted photograph and copyrighted text.
Now, how do I know it's copyrighted photograph and text?
You can assume that,
okay,
because by virtue of its creation, it is protected by copyright.
So I should assume content is owned by somebody who doesn't want me to steal it.
That's probably right.
Okay.
And actually, not just the photograph and the text, but also the code that's used to render that photograph and text on the page is protected by copyright.
And that also goes...
Whoever created the page owns that content as well. Now, it would be very easy for someone to simply pull up this page, color in the text of the code,
we'll select, paste, and it's mine.
And you've got it on your own site if you'd like to do it that way. But
technically, I have stolen your property.
Correct. Copyrighted material.
Yeah. All right, let's take it to the next step. Suppose it's just a link. Suppose I want to create a website that's a link to lawyers. And I say, hey, I like this guy. I'm going to put a link to their site on my website.
There's almost no case in which that's going to get you into trouble. Linking is how the web came to be.
Sure.
And you don't need a license from the site you want to link to in order to do that. However, there are some things you can do with links that can get you into trouble.
Like what?
Like saying that here's a link to a lawyer who screwed me out of a lot of money.
Granted, okay.
Or here's a link to a lawyer that I use, or a lawyer that represents me when that's not true.
How about just grabbing somebody else's collection of links?
Well, that's a good question, actually. Here's a page that's created by LookSmart.
Okay.
I pulled this up doing a search for classical music on this site. LookSmart's in the business of going out and finding the best links that it believes you'll look for.
And I say, hey, that's a nice list.
Music.
I'm going to put that on my site.
Exactly right. But this is the product of LookSmart's editorial discretion. They've spent a lot of time searching the web and pulling up sites and creating a list. That list, because it is the product of creative expression, is protected by copyright.
So I could individually link to that classical music site, but I can't grab their entire list of links because that's a creative work on their part.
That, again, would be a potential copyright infringement.
Gotcha. All right, let's take it to the next step now. Suppose I just steal that stuff and just put a little frame on my site.
Well, actually, the practice of framing.
I'm moving your stuff over.
There's a site that I've pulled up here called rotonews.com that actually is engaged in what you've just described.
Okay.
It's a great site that tells you about all sorts of baseball information, and it will actually take you to pages that are the newspapers for your favorite teams,
so
like the Atlanta Braves.
I'm on rotonews.com, but I'm reading the Atlanta
Journal
newspaper, which I assume he doesn't own and didn't pay for?
Right. What he's done is framed the Atlanta Braves page in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. you're still on rotonews.com,
Right.
but you've got the Atlanta Journal-Constitution
Is that an
here.
infringement of the paper's copyright?
That's going to get them into some difficulty if the Atlanta Journal-Constitution finds out about it.
But maybe the paper doesn't care?
Maybe the paper doesn't care.
Whose ads are on that? Is that the Atlanta Journal?
That's the Atlanta's Constitution.
So maybe they don't like the idea that somebody's spreading their ads around.
Absolutely right. And this may drive traffic to the Journal.
But if they don't like it, they can stop you.
They could send you a letter saying cease and desist, and you probably should.
Gotcha. All right, let's get to the final point, the whole URL domain name issue. I want to go in, and I happen to like a particular name that somebody else just happens to have a business by that name. What's the situation there?
Well, what you do in trying to figure out the domain name under which you want to list your site is go to a site like register.com.
Okay.
And register.com will allow you to search all of the available top-level domains like .com, .net, .org, and sort of more esoteric ones like .togo or .tonga.
We know we have a lot of weird extensions out there.
That's right.
So you wanted to create a site called LukeSkywalker.something.
.something. And what I've searched for is LukeSkywalker.ch, .fm, and sure enough, I could register the domain names LukeSkywalker.tonga, .to.
Okay.
If I decided to do that, I'd own that domain name, at least until LucasArts found out that I'd registered the domain and sent me a letter saying, you can't use Luke Skywalker.
They could stop you from using LukeSkywalker.to.
Probably. They probably could not.
Why probably?
Well, they probably couldn't stop me from owning the domain, but they could stop me from using the domain in commerce or to put up a website on the web that advertised Star Wars memorabilia.
Suppose it was LukeSkywalker.com and it was for a gardening business or something.
They still could probably prevent me from using the domain.
They own the trademark. You shouldn't play with it.
That's right. There's a real problem on the web right now where people have gone out and registered dozens and dozens of famous trademarks. Cyber squatting, exactly.
Right.
And there's some legislation pending in Congress to deal with that.
David, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
One of the real messy areas of intellectual property ownership on the internet is in the academic field. Professors' notes, student lecture notes, term papers, all showing up on the web. Is this a free-for-all, or can you get into trouble using this kind of material? Tanya Shevitz is the higher education reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle. Tanya's been covering this story for the paper, and you did something very interesting. You actually went to some of these classes at San Francisco State and UC Berkeley. You took notes, and then you went to these websites like Versity.com and StudentU.com and compared, and you didn't really like what you found there, did you?
No, and I don't think students will either. I took 118 pages of notes in total for 7 classes, and in one class specifically...
Now, this was a TV class at San Francisco State?
Mm-hmm, and they posted 3 paragraphs of notes.
Okay.
And
you brought your notes, right?
Yes.
And let me just show our audience. I mean, these are all the notes you took. I mean, you do write big, but these are a lot of notes from a class. Yes. This was your version of good notes.
Yes.
Their version was about 8 lines.
Right, and they were taken, actually, 2 of the graphs were taken from the board. They didn't even
They just
write
stole
their
them right
own.
off.
Yeah.
All right. So number one, regardless of whether it's legal or not, the quality of the notes may not be so great, and certainly the quantity may not be so great. What about the quality issue? I mean, did you find places in which there were just bad notes?
I found some blatant errors. In one class, a journalism class, actually, the professor had spoken about the controversy at the Brooklyn Art Museum and with the mayor, and the student instead posted that it was the San Francisco Art Museum and it was Mayor Brown.
The San Francisco mayor, not the New York mayor.
Right, exactly. But since then, they've
So
gone back to
you would have flunked that exam real quick, right?
Very quickly.
But they found it.
They went back and changed it.
All right, so
later.
Without regard to the legal issues, there may not be good notes, there may not be adequate notes, they may be wrong, et cetera, et cetera. Why do the schools and the professors care so much about this? I mean, doesn't it help students do their work?
Well, the professors are concerned on various levels. They're concerned about the copyright and intellectual property issues. They feel that many of their lectures are based on their own research or on their books in some cases, and so they own that property. In other cases, they're concerned about the portrayal of their class to the outside world, their colleagues.
But if I'm sitting in a classroom listening to a professor and I'm creating the notes, I'm writing them. Isn't that my writing? Can't I do with that what I want?
But you're taking what the professor is saying and selling them, and both the universities have student conduct codes against that because it's selling the lecture
I'm sort of
notes.
rewriting, editing somebody else's material,
exactly.
and then of course trying to make money off of it. Not so good. Now you went to a class at UC Berkeley, or a couple of them also. What happened there?
I went to a couple classes that were posted by StudentU.com, and they didn't even show up for 2 of the 3 classes that I went to.
So if you were counting on not going to class, going over to the website, getting the notes, they just weren't even there.
Yeah.
So that's not so good either. All right. Are the professors also concerned just about, they don't want people like, and it's sort of a private, it's public, but it's private in the classroom. You may say things, you've got tenure, right, that might be a little bit controversial. You don't necessarily want those broadcast all over the world.
They feel that it may have a chilling effect on their speech because they can't say anything they want.
Yeah.
So that is a concern for them as well. If they're speaking about communism, they may feel that they may be targeted.
Sure.
Or vivisection, maybe.
Right.
You know, then animal rights groups may come.
Is anybody actually trying to stop this? Is any professor, any college suing one of these websites? UC Berkeley and UCLA have sent cease and desist letters to many of the different organizations. And we'll see what happens.
Yeah. It's
All right,
likely
now,
to go to court.
Well, let's get to the next subject, which is term papers. As we know now, lots of college students, time for a term paper, you simply go on the web, find some good stuff, paste, copy and paste, there's your term paper, send it in. I mean, it takes you a couple hours, you haven't learned anything.
Right. There's a lot of temptation, and there's a new site called plagiarism.org that UC Berkeley is negotiating to use throughout the campus, but they piloted it last spring and found in one class on neurobiology, out of 320 students, 45 had plagiarized their papers off the
UC Berkeley, that high percentage had actually stolen the papers off the web.
And the students had been warned several times that their papers would be run through this site.
Okay, now you did a nice little experiment here too. You wrote a phony paper too, right? You said you have a paper on global warming.
Global warming.
You went out and just copy and pasted stuff from the web. And then you took it to plagiarism, and then you pretended you were a professor.
Exactly.
You took it to plagiarism.org, and what happened?
Well, I ran it through, and here's my original report.
That's your paper, your pseudo paper.
And here's the report on my paper.
So this is plagiarism.org, and what is it telling us here?
It shows that 75 to 100% of my paper was plagiarized.
So that big red button there says this was terrible, you stole most of the material there.
Exactly.
So like as you go down the line, blue would have been pretty good original material, et cetera. All right, so what is this stuff? It says content analysis below the overall rating there, Tanya.
Well, this shows how many websites I stole material from.
Oh, so 8 different websites were found, and there are the links that the other websites you stole the information from. This is pretty cool.
And it's color-coded, so you can tell exactly where it was stolen
from. Where the information, so you stole green from
thing.
someplace and red from, scroll down a little bit more so we can see. So now the black means they couldn't find it.
They didn't find that.
You wrote a paragraph all on your own.
I actually stole that from the internet, but they didn't find that.
They didn't find it. Okay, well, it's pretty good though. They found 8 websites. All right, last question. There are legitimate sites like homework.com to help high school kids and grade school kids doing their homework, which provide all kinds of reference information. Theoretically, you could steal that too, right?
Yeah, and there's a high school that's actually using this site, and they found many cases of plagiarism. But in some cases, students at that age don't yet know how to cite, so it's a problem. They really need to be taught.
Tanya, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Another area of potential copyright abuse on the internet is photographs and works of art. There are millions of images up there, and with a click or two, you can copy them, edit them, put them on your hard drive, send them to a friend, even try to sell them. To get a handle on the proper and improper use of images on the web, we've invited Karen Gauthier of Adobe to join us. Hi, Karen.
Hi there.
First of all, as I indicated, it's very easy to go on a web and just grab some images and do what you want with them, right? Show us, first of all, how you can actually do that, maybe make a couple little modifications and say, hey, this is mine now.
Right. So I'm going to take this file here, this frame that I could have downloaded from the web.
Okay.
It's very easy to just take that, drag and drop it into the document that I'm working on, and it's now part of my image. I can do things like change the color. In this case, what I'll do is I'll just fade it right into the background, and at this point it's part of my document, and no one would really ever know.
So you've done some work, it's sort of yours, but that underlying image you don't own the rights to.
Right.
And so you violated somebody's copyright.
Exactly.
Now, how does the owner of that image go in and do watermarking, which is I know what you guys do in Photoshop, to protect that image?
Okay, so I have this image of a flower, very easy to go in and apply a watermark to that photograph. I go to my Digimark plugin, which ships with Photoshop. I embed the watermark. And the idea in here is that I go to the Digimark website and obtain an ID. There's 2 different
So you kind of register as an owner of artwork.
That's right. So just a really quick overview. There's 2 different kinds of IDs. I have a basic ID, which is free. I go up and register, and I have a smart ID, which I pay for, which will allow me to actually put in a URL, which I'll show you a little bit later. So I go in here. I already have an ID assigned. I have the opportunity to apply restricted use or adult content. There's also controls over how visible you want your watermark to be. So in this,
literally visible?
That's right. Well, it's very subtle. What it does is it introduces noise into your pixels.
But I assume you don't see it. I mean, you haven't
That's
ruined
right.
the image. That's the whole point.
Exactly.
Okay.
So even if we go all the way up
here. So you
here,
make it like the most obvious case.
So we've got it at the most visible. I say OK, and it applies the watermark to my image.
So it's now adding the watermark to that image of the flower.
You'll notice it doesn't look like it's been affected at all.
Like, can we actually go in there and, I mean, how do we know it's watermarked then?
I can zoom in. And if you take a look, hopefully we can get this here.
Go ahead. So
I have
that's
the
before and after.
And this is after.
So that little noise pattern.
Very subtle noise pattern.
Yeah, you can see in that big zoomed-in look, but nobody's going to see it if they're
Right.
actually using the image.
Right.
All right, so that's how you put the watermark in. Now, if I now go on the web and I see somebody's image, how do I know that it has a watermark on it?
Okay, it's very easy to do. What I'll do is is drag this again into my document, and you can see I've got that in there now. And again, I can fade that right into the background, and it's still, mind you, even though it looks like I've changed it quite a bit, it still has the watermark on it.
Okay, so the same bit you did, but even though I take it into Photoshop, manipulate that image, add things, change things, the watermark stays in there.
Right. Now to read that, you'll note I can go into Digimark, read watermark. And I've got, it finds the same
So I've been
ID.
put on notice, hey, okay, now, suppose I legitimately want to then pay somebody for the rights to use that image. I can find that then through the watermark registration information?
That's right. I could go to my web lookup at this point, and it would, using the ID, show my information. If it went to the photographer's URL, for example, you could have license agreements up there for people to buy it, all that kind of thing.
Okay, now there is another service, I believe, in which you can actually go out, it's kind of like a web crawler that will look to see if anybody has in fact stolen your images and has them on their websites.
This is a new service from Digimark, and it's a crawler, as you mentioned, and it's a continual crawl or search of your website, or sorry, of the World Wide Web.
Website, right.
And it brings up this kind of report that you can go and verify on a monthly basis or whatnot, and it gives you information as to where your images were found.
Okay, now I take it these are registered watermarked images.
That's right. These are anything that you just saw me do up on the website.
So one of the benefits of doing that is you have the ability to go out and see, hey, has anybody grabbed one of your images?
That's right.
Now, is this only with like Photoshop file formats, or can you do this in any file format?
No, anything that you save out of Photoshop, JPEG, a GIF file, they'll all be recorded.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, well, perhaps the most complex area of copyright controversy on the web right now has to do with music and the abundance of all those free MP3 files on the web. Anybody with an MP3 player, a CD burner, can become his or her own music publisher. Of course, the music industry doesn't like this too much. Here to help us understand the MP3 story is Andy Rathbone, and he's the author of this brand new book, MP3 for Dummies. So you're the expert, I guess.
Well, I've written the book.
Okay. First of all, you have some of the players here. Let's talk about this one first. I guess this started it all in terms of portable MP3 players, right? The Rio.
Yeah, the Diamond Rio was the first one to come out in the United States, and it was really heavily promoted, and it really took off. It's the #1. They came out with a second version. They've even come out with a third version while everybody else is trying to come up with their first.
So let's go back to the process now. If I want to download music onto my little Rio player here, I go onto the web, and there's lots of places I can just go that have just tons and tons of MP3 files that I can download, right?
That's true. You download an MP3 file like any other file, and then that particular one, you plug this into your parallel port, and plug the rest of the cord into the Diamond Rio. You just drag and drop the files, and then just shoots it right in.
For people who may not know, Andy, let's go to some of the sites. Obviously, mp3.com is a source of MP3 files.
MP3.com was one of the first and one of the biggest. It's had about almost 30 million downloads of MP3
Now,
files.
this is all legitimate, right? I mean, this is legal stuff. This is not stealing anybody's music.
Absolutely. The bands who are on here want to be on here. They look at it, MP3, as a promotional tool.
Now, are these just new bands, or might it be established, well-known groups who also just want to do some promotion by getting onto the site?
There are some established bands who realize that MP3 is cool. It's hip.
Yeah.
It's happening now.
So it's not just Joe's Little Garage Band, necessarily.
No, and it's also very inexpensive promotion. There's no billboards, there's no
Okay, so
touring.
there's the mp3.com site. I guess Rolling Stone is a good site to go on if you're looking for MP3 files. Do you have that one up?
Rolling Stone jumped on it as quickly as they could, and MP3 and more. They have voting. People can download the MP3s and say which ones they like the best. And
okay, that's the next issue. There are a million files out there, right? And sometimes it's hard to figure out finding the music you want. Now, there are sites, I guess, like Listen.com that sort of organize that for you.
I was very impressed by Listen.com. They're here in San Francisco, and let me find them here. They've got a staff of musicians and music critics who listen to MP3 files.
And they kind of recommend MP3s you might want to download depending on what kind of music you like.
Exactly. They tell you what you're going to find so you can download the music that you want to before you find it.
And as we were talking, say, under the big shots I see over there, I mean, you've got the big-time groups, Gladys Knight, Blues Brothers, Ronnie Millsap, etc.
All these people have legitimate MP3s on here. They want to have their music downloaded for publicity. Louis Armstrong, Chet Baker, Billie Holiday.
Wow. All right, now the issue is, of course, there are other sites you can go to in which there's music that you don't have the rights to.
That's true. Lycos has been taking some flack because they just go out there and grab any particular MP3.
So if I was
whether
looking
it's-
for a David Bowie song or something,
Let's type it in.
and I just go to the MP3 search in Lycos, and this stuff, who knows where it came from?
And here it's found David Bowie songs that aren't legal. I mean, David Bowie did not say that you can put my songs on
somebody
here.
copied the CD, put it up on a website somewhere, and I can download it, put it on my Rio, and I'm listening to the music and I haven't paid for it.
But that's all illegal.
Right,
Yes.
that you shouldn't be doing. Now, beyond just doing it and playing it on my Rio, I can actually now broadcast this, right? I can start my own little web radio station and play this music that I've stolen.
Yeah, that's become very popular because it's so easy. You download Winamp, which is the most popular MP3
Right.
player. You go to shoutcast.com and
And these are just different
click on
guys who have
one.
just saying, hey, I've got this song, you want to hear it?
exactly. There are a few rules. You have to pay $20 to the Copyright Office to be able to do this. You can't play one artist over and over and over.
So is this legal now?
It is legal, yes.
Okay, so Shoutcast, you're not stealing songs then?
No, but it's kind of a gray area because they say that you have to download and use it in a reasonable fashion, and nobody's defined what reasonable is.
But nobody's getting paid for this, right?
The artists aren't.
The artists are not getting paid. So it's a rather nice, convenient way to steal the music I want to steal.
Well, you can look at it that way.
I mean, that's one of the points there. All right, now let's talk about the protection schemes. Obviously, as I said, the music industry doesn't like this because guys aren't getting the royalties. So what is being done to try to protect music in the MP3 format?
Well, just like the images you were talking about earlier, there are digital watermarks that are being placed on the music that is being released now on CDs. The digital watermarks let the record companies trace what master the CD came from, so they can trace the copy fitters. It lets them, in the future, they're hoping it will let the players look at the digital watermark and decide whether that music can be copied or not.
Yeah, no, let's talk about that now. You have you have several other players besides the original here, and let's talk about this one, which you just got, I guess. It's an RCA MP3 player, but this includes copyright protections somehow, doesn't it?
It's the first one that did. Yeah, I was kind of bummed, to tell you the truth, when I bought the thing and I dragged and dropped my MP3 files into there, and it wouldn't play. And I was going, what am I doing
Does this have
wrong
some sort
here?
of encryption in there that this thing won't take?
Because you have to use the software that comes with this, and then when you take your MP3 file and you use the software that comes with this, it encrypts the MP3 file. So there are no longer MP3 files once they're on here. They've been turned into something else.
Okay, so once I can get the file into here if I go through their particular little filter, but
yes.
then I can't then give this to my friend
No,
and
you
copy
can't.
it.
No.
Let me just sort of play this a second and plug this in so our audience can hear. Are we hearing that now? Yeah, there we go. So, I mean, again, the whole point for people who don't know, it's pretty darn good quality MP3.
It does sound good, yeah. Unless you're an audiophile, you won't know the difference between that and a CD-ROM.
Sure, and it's relatively small file size. So how long does it take to download a typical song?
Well, I have a cable modem. It takes 30 seconds.
Well, you got cable modem, okay.
If
But
you
how about,
have
say,
a 56K, I'd say maybe 15, 20 minutes.
Okay, for
a song, one song.
Oh, okay, well that's not that fast. But still pretty good quality, and you can carry a thing like this how many songs?
Most of the ones that are out today carry about one CD.
Right. All right, now, finally, this is not clean though, right? There's still a war about what the standard should be and how you do this copyright protection on music.
It's still a gray area. No one has decided how they're going to keep people from making copies of these MP3 songs. It's different than when you used to be able to just take a cassette, record a CD and give it to a friend. That's one person getting it.
Right.
Now you make an MP3 copy, you put it up on the internet, and millions of people can have it.
Got it. Andy, thanks so much. All right, that's our look at copyright on the internet. I'll be back in just a moment with my pick of the week, a new notebook computer for the power user. Now for my pick of the week. If you are into all this media stuff that the copyright lawyers worry about, like graphics and music and video, I have found a killer notebook computer that can do it all. This is the brand new Sony Vaio XG9. It is very appropriately described by Sony not as a laptop or a notebook, but as a carry-on desktop. This is one powerful portable computer. Here are the specs: a Pentium 3 running at 500 megahertz, an 18-gig hard drive, DVD-ROM drive, 128 megs of RAM, USB port, iLink port, an absolute ton of bundled software for business and creative applications, including Adobe Premiere and DV Gate Motion. You can even get a CD burner that fits into the modular drive bay. Sony has solved the problem of cooling the P3 chip in a notebook computer by inventing a very clever expandable cooler flap that allows adequate airflow while you're using the computer, but then folds into the nice slim package when you turn the computer off. Sony has also added its jog dial. The first time ever on a notebook computer, the programmable jog dial changes functions depending on what you're doing. It can launch applications, change window size, browse the web, adjust volume, brightness, external display mode, etc., all from one button. What is amazing is that they've put all of this mega desktop multimedia power into a package that is 1.8 inches thick and weighs just over 6 pounds. It is the Sony Vaio XG9. Price is just under $3,500. That's it for this edition of the Chronicles. Thanks for joining us. Please join me on my weekly web radio show. Just hit the radio link on the About.com homepage. We'll see you here next time. The Computer Chronicles is brought to you by RonDiamond.com, the oldies site on the internet. Music and memories from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, not just another jukebox. Additional support comes from the law offices of Ivan Hoffman, Lawyering with Integrity, for internet law, copyright, trademark, and other intellectual property law. And by TechWeb for up-to-the-minute technology news.
To purchase a videotape copy of today's program, call toll-free 1-888-310-7850. Please specify the show number and the topic.
Next week on the Computer Chronicles, how to set up a home network. We'll show you how to use the existing telephone wiring in your house to interconnect several computers. We'll look at a very simple, low-cost solution to setting up a second workstation in your home. Also, we'll look at wireless networking using Apple's new AirPort technology, and the Home Portal, a way to interconnect all the electronic devices in your house. Plus, my pick of the week, an amazing new computer peripheral that can turn your PC into a laboratory. It's all coming up next week on the Computer Chronicles.